Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending our second Housing Element Update Community Workshop with the City of Dublin. My name is Michael Cass. I'm Principal Planner, who is the staff planner who's managing this project. I'd also like to introduce a couple of other individuals who are here this evening. On the city's end, we also have our Community Development Director, Jeff Baker, as well as our Assistant Community Development Director, Christy Wheeler. And our consultant team is comprised of two individuals from Kimley Horn and Associates, including Dave Barquist and Inez Galmiche, who are going to be the main presenters this evening. Thank you again for everyone for attending, and we look forward to having a robust discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. And if we would like to get started, we'll give you an overview of the agenda that we'd like to start with this evening. The agenda for this evening is to provide you as participants an overview of the housing element update process, the summary of the outreach efforts and the communication we've had with the community and stakeholders to date. And then we want to talk about the candidate site strategies, or those sites that we're identifying in the policy program to accommodate our growth need over the planning period. Then we'll explore policies and programs that create the foundation of the housing element and provide you from next steps, and so you can anticipate other participation opportunities as we go through this planning process. So why don't we talk about an overview of the housing element? And so if you think of the housing element, it's really one of the 7 mandated elements of the general plan. In some cases, there's 8 mandated with environmental justice added in there. But one of the requirements of this is all of these elements have to be consistent with each other, internally consistent with each other. And they have different topical areas such as land use, parks and open space, etc. So housing is just one element or one chapter of the city's overarching general plan. And really the housing, as the name implies, it addresses housing issues and needs for the residents of your community. And it's just not existing need, but also growth need. So there's 2 pieces to that equation. And so when we look at that future need, we want to project out our housing needs with the community, but we also want to do that by income category. So we have various levels of income within your community. We look at the whole spectrum of affordability as it relates to the need of your community. You think of the foundation of the plan itself as the direction setting goals and the specific policies, actions, and objectives to achieve those goals. That really is the guiding tool or the guiding document that helps guide future decision-making process as we go through the planning of over the next 8 years. And what's unique about the housing element, it's the only one of the general plan that requires review and certification by the state of California. So it goes up to Sacramento for review for compliance with a host of laws, rules, and regulations. The end product is a certification from the state that says you meet the spirit and intent of the law as it was intended, and the city can be assured that they have a compliant, a housing element that's compliant with state law. So why do we update those? Really, again, that compliance with the state law is critical, but it's really a demonstration. It's a demonstration that you can meet the needs that we project out for your community. So we had a growth need of X, we want to be able to plan and have the resources available to accommodate that growth need of X over the planning period. When we have a certified and legally compliant housing element, it opens the door for many funding and financing sources. So it's a great idea to be in compliance with what the law requires us as we become eligible for state grants and other programs of assistance that would further enhance our ability to serve our public. But it also is a way for you as the public and participating in this process to become engaged in planning for your community. We're looking into the future. You're part of the existing fabric of your community and the future fabric. We want to make sure the community is engaged within that planning process. And again, the preventing the state from penalizing the city. What we mean by that is if we're compliant with the state law, then we're doing our due diligence to ensure that there wouldn't be any repercussions or legal repercussions from the state in terms of penalties or any other sanctions that would occur if we didn't have that compliance with state law. So what is the process here? I apologize for the white the screen there, but hopefully you can see that we have community workshops as part of this process. You're participating in one right now. We do have a community survey that's available. We'll give you a link to where you can find that currently. But we also want to update our demographic conditions, our policies, programs, and objectives, really get a good picture of who we are as a community and what we need to plan for. We look at adequate sites to meet our regional housing needs assessment growth needs. So we have to identify sites to accommodate what we think our growth needs are. And we have to do a requisite environmental analysis. So we have to look at the impacts or potential impacts of growth and see if we can mitigate those issues over the course of time. We have planning commission, city council meetings, so the requisite process with the public to go through the approvals. So at the end of the day, this document will be ready for city council's blessing. It will go through planning commission among other public hearing processes before that. You'll have plenty of time as a community member and stakeholder to provide comments to the draft document before that decision is made. And like we said earlier, there's an HCD review process. Housing Community Development at the state of California reviews and provides input, requests for changes, modifications to the plan, policy program, the analysis to make sure that we're compliant with state law. And ultimately, the goal is to find us in substantial compliance with the state law and have the state of California just illustrate that to us through a letter of certification. And so the next step in this process is really telling you about the community process we've gone through and engagement to date. So I'm going to turn it over to Inez to walk you through that.
Thanks, Dave. All right, so as we mentioned, community engagement is an important part of the update process. And since we started, we've had a variety of different meetings and opportunities for the community and stakeholders to give comments. And this includes 2 check-ins with the city council. We had one back in October and another in November over the 2020 and 2021, where we discussed the housing element update process, as well as discussions on candidate sites and ways to address the city's RHNA allocation, which we'll discuss in a few slides. We've also had, with this workshop, two community workshops. We had one a month ago, and we have today's. Both are being recorded and will be available on the city's website, and we'll provide you with that link towards the end of the presentation as well, if you'd like to go back and watch that first workshop to get caught up. And as Dave mentioned, we also have an ongoing survey online. It's been up since December and will be concluding at the end of this month. We have here for you some preliminary findings from the survey. So far, we've heard that the community is missing some affordable housing options, as well as senior housing options. Some recommended locations for potential future housing were new housing options near the BART station, near transit hubs in general. We also heard that regional shopping centers, such as Hacienda Crossing, would be ideal for potential future housing. And overall, we heard that approximately 72% of survey respondents would like to see both for sale and rental units added to the housing stock, and 22 specified they would like specifically units for sale. So as I mentioned, the survey is still available, and we encourage you to please fill it out if you haven't already. Send it out to other community members, neighbors, friends, family that would also like to have a say in the update process. We've got the link here up on the screen, and the survey is also available on the City of Dublin's Housing Element Update webpage. You've got the link at the bottom of your screen here, and we'll show it again at the end of the presentation for you to access. So now to get into the meat of it, candidate site strategies. So with each housing element update cycle every 8 years, the region is allocated a certain number of units that it must plan for. And the region will then divide it up into a fair share for each city. So the City of Dublin was allocated 3,719 total units that it must plan for. So the city is not a developer. It will not be constructing these units, but through the housing element, it has to show that it can allow for the market to build these 3,719 units. And now these are divided up, as you see on your screen, by income category. And the incomes are divided up by income range. And this means that it's based on a median family income from 2021 for a family of 4 in Alameda County. And the housing element has to show that it can accommodate about 1,000 units affordable to very low income households, about a little over 600 for low income households, 560 for moderate income households, and over 1,400 for above moderate income households. And so as part of the housing element update process, we have to identify strategies and sites to show how the city will be meeting this RHNA allocation over the next 8 years. And during this process, we have to consider potential infrastructure constraints, whether there's enough infrastructure in all areas of the city where we might be able to add new units. We have to consider access to community resources and services, as well as environmental barriers and access to transportation. So we've had 2 check-ins with the City Council already, during which we discussed some potential strategies. The City Council has approved of these 5 following strategies. And that includes projected ADU development. So the state allows us to project out and add an estimated number of units per year to develop over the next 8 years. The city can also account for pipeline projects. And so these are projects that have been already approved by the city, but not yet constructed, as well as currently in review by the city and are planned to be constructed over the next 8 years. We can count for those. We have also identified existing housing element sites. So these were candidate sites that were included in this current 5th cycle housing element, as well as in the 4th cycle housing element. And we've got some public and semi-public partnerships ongoing with the city, working on the development of housing on certain sites that we'll account for. And there is remaining capacity in the downtown area that will accommodate for additional housing units over the next 8 years. And these 5 categories add up to approximately 60% of the city's RHNA allocation. So as such, we need to identify a couple more ways to fully meet the RHNA allocation. And so what we've done is the city has identified additional candidate sites with the potential to develop housing. And these include sites at Hacienda Crossing, as well as Alameda County surplus properties. And we'll show you these on a map in just a moment. All right. And so what we're going to do now, we're going to jump into our first feedback exercise. So what we have here is a map of part of the city. We'll have 3 maps to show you where we have some of the sites identified, and we'd like to hear some of your feedback as to what you think of these sites that we've identified. So I'll go through and describe them. And if you'd like to provide any comments, any feedback, any questions, please raise your hand and we'll take you off of mute and let you speak.
And as you're talking about these sites, would you mind zooming in a little bit so it's a little bit easier for our participants to see?
Definitely.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll go through the description and then we'll jump into any potential comments or questions on this one, and then we'll move on to the following maps. So we've got this first one here. This is the Boulevard project. It's a multi-phase large development that's currently under construction. We've got this site here, which is Ashton at Dublin Station, which will include some affordable components. We've got another pipeline site right here. And so I should mention, apologies, these are sites that are in the pipeline in blue. They're currently under review or approved and in construction. We've got this site here, which is another affordable housing development. The pink sites, 2 sites here, these are the Alameda County surplus property sites near the BART station. And then we've got Hacienda Crossing located here, or yes, Hacienda Crossing located here.
So, and I just want to provide a little bit of additional information for the benefit of the public. So the purple area, which is Hacienda Crossings, is just a portion of that shopping center. The transit center properties, which are shown in pink, those do not have a pending application, but those are currently vacant lots that the city is considering potentially rezoning to accommodate housing. This affordable housing site has not been approved yet for clarification, whereas the other 2 blue sites that are shown are approved and under construction.
Thank you, Michael. If anybody would like to make any comments, any feedback on these sites, if you could please raise your hand and we'll add comments to the map here. We've got a Tom Evans. I'm allowing you to speak, so you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, I think that the Alameda County surplus property is probably an appropriate place to start. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about Hacienda Crossings and the fact that the retail is not doing so well. That's another spot that might be appropriate.
You said Hacienda Crossing as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Any other specifics, any other comments on the other sites? And if we don't have anyone, oh, Tom, yes.
Actually, just a question. I had heard that we have enough zoned property in Dublin to accommodate the new RHNA numbers already. Is that true?
I can speak to that. So we have existing zoning allows for most of our regional housing needs allocation. There is approximately a little over 600 remaining units that we need to plan for that are in the lower income categories. And because we don't have sites that beyond what we've already identified that are specifically for affordable housing, our city council has asked us to look for sites that can accommodate roughly twice that. And the intent being that we also will have a little bit of a buffer because there is a provision referring to no net loss, where if the property is developed at a different affordability level, then we need to accommodate that remaining need. So the simple answer to your question, though, is we do not have enough sites. We need to find sites for at least 600 units, but the council has asked us to look at close to 1,200 units.
Okay, thank you.
And if we don't have any additional comments or questions on this one, we'll move on to the next map. So this is the next one here. We've got a couple sites spread out, but we've got one up here. This is a 5th cycle site. So that was identified in the current housing element that we'll be taking. We'll continue on into the 6th cycle. And we've got another one of those 5th cycle properties here, surrounded by East Ranch on Croak. And so this includes public and semi-public projects, which are the 2 green properties here. And then at the bottom, we've got Bernog and Rigetti developments as well. And these are all in the pipeline as well.
And I'd like to clarify something. So it came up now, but also earlier in the presentation with the public, semi-public sites. To clarify, public, semi-public is our general plan designation for the sites. And so it means that there would be public or semi-public uses that would be at some point built on those properties. One use that is allowed in those designations is an affordable housing project that's built by a nonprofit housing developer.
Thank you, Michael. Does anybody have any comments, any feedback you'd like to provide on these particular sites or strategies? And feel free as well, if you have any comments, any questions, please feel free to use the chat at the bottom of your screen. We'll be checking that as well if you'd rather type that instead of coming off of mute and speak. All right, and we've got Lulu Pang. I'll allow you. There we go. You should have permission to unmute yourself now.
Quick question. What does the blue stand for?
The blue refers to the pipeline projects. So these are projects that have either already been approved by the city and not fully constructed yet, or projects that have been submitted to the city for review and have not yet received their permits or entitlement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And we see Tom, you're next. Feel free to unmute yourself again.
Thank you. So I'm just kind of curious about those 2 little green squares. So are those properties that the city would have to purchase in order to utilize, or how does that work?
Michael, I might turn to you for an answer on this one.
Sorry, I was typing a response to share some information with everyone. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm curious about how those little green squares work, the public, semi-public. Is that something that the city of Dublin, would they have to purchase those lots? No?
No, so it's no different than any other sites. I mean, they are privately owned. And so there would be a private developer that would come forward and propose a project that would be permitted on those properties. What I would like to clarify, though, for those two green squares, which are public, semi-public, one of them's 2.5 acres and one of them's 2 acres, their exact location for the lower one has some flexibility in terms of where it is located on the larger parcel. That's just where it's shown for placeholder purposes, but it would be a precise location would be identified when the larger property is developed. For the green public, semi-public site, that's part of the East Ranch property. That location has been specifically identified for a project that was approved by the City Council late last year. So again, to clarify again, because somebody asked me to repeat some of the information I shared earlier. So they have the designation of public, semi-public, which just means that there would be some sort of public or semi-public use that at some point would be developed there. So that could be like a school, or it could be a fire station, or it could be of those natures, or it could be an affordable housing site as well.
Does the city have a preference? For example, do they like those public, semi-public lots before they would like Hacienda Crossings or something like that?
So the direction that we received from the City Council was to prioritize sites where housing was currently already allowed under zoning. And these two sites already allow affordable housing. So they were prioritized before identifying sites such as Hacienda Crossings that would require a general plan amendment and rezoning.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess I'd also like to add, in the case of the public, semi-public site on the East Ranch property, that part of the proposal for that project is to donate the land to an affordable housing developer that would then build the affordable housing.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom. All right, if I don't see any other comments or questions, we'll move on to the next map. Oh, we have one hand from Brandon M. All right, you may speak now.
Hi there. I was just wondering about the East Ranch project. There's a referendum going on. I would like to know what would be happening if the ordinance were to be overturned.
I'll answer that question. I think it's a little too soon
right.
to anticipate that. We are definitely going to be taking it into consideration as we move forward with the housing element update, but I think it's a little premature to say what the city would do.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could just add to that, my name is Jeff Baker. I'm the Community Development Director. As you pointed out, it is under referendum, a potential referendum. The developer's proposal was to donate that site for affordable housing. And so if the project were to be, if a referendum were to prevail, then the developer would not be providing that site at no cost. It would still have a semi-public designation that would allow affordable housing, but it would no longer be donated as part of that project because that project wouldn't exist in its current proposal.
Thank you. All right, and then we have one last map here. So we've got a few different sites here identified. We've got the downtown retail district located here with a few sites able to accommodate some housing units. We've got the downtown TOD or transit oriented district. This TOD district accounts for this whole region here, but it's labeled differently as these are pipeline projects as well, but it is under the same downtown TOD district. So these specific pipeline projects here marked in blue include Eden, which will have some affordable components to it. We have Avalon Bay communities here with market rate units. And we've got these two, which are Bridge Housing and Amador Station. And I see one hand up from Brandon M. If you'd like to unmute yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to lower my hand.
Oh,
I don't
no
have any
worries.
questions. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to raise your hand. We have Davis Nelson. You may now unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could say what density in terms of housing units is wanted on each designate or each color rather on the map.
So the density will depend for each site.
Yeah, so to add to that, so the way that the map is depicted is it's not the color coding, it does not correspond with density. So density is going to correspond with what the general plan designation is for the respective site. We were hoping to not, there's close to 30 sites we talked about. So for the purpose of today's meeting, we were not wanting to dive into what all the densities are and number of units per site. We were just talking more big picture, if individuals think sites are appropriate or if they have concerns with particular sites. And we will be having a couple of meetings in March where we'll be diving a little bit further into the details after getting some of this preliminary feedback.
This is Christy Wheeler, Assistant Community Development Director. So I'd also like to add to that in terms of meeting the state's requirements for identifying sites for affordable housing, we do need to provide at least 30 units to the acre. So that's sort of the bottom of the density range, and it could go up from there depending on the site and what we need to do in terms of meeting our housing need.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Michael. We've got a hand raised by Richard Thornberry. You may now unmute yourself.
Hi, you can hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Perfect. So I have a question about this, I guess, the rezoning idea for some of these retail spaces. Is there, I guess, were these identified because there's like an appetite to maybe redevelop them as housing? Or I guess what I'm getting at is sort of what is the likelihood that, you know, we can zone these to meet the requirements, but what is the likelihood that we'll actually get something built and accomplished there?
So these sites were identified because there is a likelihood to develop. That's as part of the housing element update, we are required to identify sites that do have potential. And if those sites were to not develop or not develop at the capacity, then we would need to reevaluate at whichever point that is to identify further sites throughout the next 8 years.
Okay, and all of these, I guess, red ones these are privately owned. These are not, yeah, I guess they'd be privately owned. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And maybe just to add to that, again, Jeff Baker, Community Development Director. So the blue sites are all fully entitled. 2 of them are affordable housing sites, 300 units on one, 114 on another. The green site has been marketed for sale and previously entertained an offer from an affordable housing developer. So there's a good propensity that could happen. And then the 2 red sites, the one in particular up at the top of the screen, the property owner and the city have a memorandum of understanding for an affordable housing, for that to be an affordable housing site. So it's anticipated that that would occur. It's privately owned, but there's an agreement for 80 units to occur there of affordable housing. So hopefully that helps to answer your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for that info. And I guess while I'm still, unmuted, I'll just say that, I also am very supportive of some of these locations that are, near the BART stations, easy for transit. I think that these would, fall into that category as well. Also close to, like Safeway and grocery stores and things that, might help cut down on people's vehicle, traveling and things like that. So, as a resident, or I guess I live down here in this transit oriented district, and I enjoy the kind of walkability and the transit accessibility of it. And so I think that adding these kinds of elements to the city's plan are good things, to kind of make it a little easier to get around, a little easier to travel, not so much cars on the road. So anyways, I guess I'll just leave it at that for now. Thanks.
I appreciate that feedback. And as a resident of downtown, you might be interested, and they already know the city has a preferred plan for a vision for how the downtown would develop. And it's available on our website. If you go to the city's website and go to the search bar and enter preferred plan, it'll bring that up for you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Thank you. We've taken note of your comments as well. And then just to, as an FYI, we do have the, in the chat, Michael put up information on the pipeline projects, which is on the development projects website. All right, so if nobody has any further comments, questions, we'll move on. All right, and I'll pass it on back to Dave to do the section.
Thank you, Ines. So when we talk about policies and programs, think of it as a foundation of the plan itself, the housing element. And so what we want to do is we want to look back in the past of the programs and policies that we've done and learn the lessons that we have from those policies, and then build and adjust or modify programs as necessary to meet our current needs. But we also have to consider new policies and programs. So really where we start at is your existing goals and policies on the next slide. And you'll see there's a series of goals, A through E, and I'll summarize these very quickly. The first goal, or goal A, relating to housing choice and multimodal transportation. The second, goal B, looking about housing opportunities and spanning that for all segments of our population. The third goal is looking at resources to maintain our existing character or our neighborhoods. And the fourth goal is related to providing equal or fair housing opportunity for all Dublin residents, regardless of race, color, ancestry, national origin, etc. And then finally, the promotion of energy efficiency when we construct or design housing within Dublin. So these are think of the foundation of the goals, or the overarching directions that we set. And we have to look at the idea that these goals are still appropriate today, but we may need to adjust them a little bit, and we may want to provide programs, actions to implement these goals that are new, expanded, or modified, or completely changed from our prior years that we've planned for. So to give you an idea of what a program action looks like, you can see here on the screen, this is in the case an example of housing type and size variations. But essentially what the policy program does is this: it identifies the specific actions that the city is going to take. It identifies the funding or financing sources to accomplish that action, and who is the responsible agency, individual, etc., to help and guide the implementation of that program. And then what is the timeline and objectives of that program? Specifically, what are we trying to accomplish? How do we measure that we accomplish that? And what is the timeline that we will accomplish that in? And then the other relevant policies and programs in this case that relate to this program as well are cross-referenced in the program. But what we also have to consider is as we go through the sixth cycle, there's a lot of new laws, regulations, requirements that the city has to abide by. And so the policy program will be augmented and changed as a result of these new policies and programs. And so we have issues related to, and we can name the alphabet soup of assembly bills and Senate bills in case of fair housing, AB 686. But we have to look at fair housing issues, promotion of accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units with the new laws for ADUs that we see, creating objective design standards for the approval of projects and processes. And we look at streamlining of affordable housing units when the city changes the ability to accommodate the rent growth need over the planning period. Look at emergency shelters, transitional supportive housing, and wraparound services, or we call low barrier navigation centers. These are all new requirements within the law that will affect the policy program. And there's just a few more. On the next slide, housing for persons with developmental disabilities, not just persons with physical disabilities. There's new requirements in how we define what farm worker and employee housing is in the zoning code, looking at other funding, financial and assistance program that are consistent with state law, and really the removal of development constraints. And so what are the hoops and the challenges that we have to jump over in order to get projects approved and over the finish line. And so if you think about this, these new programs are as a supplement to the existing requirements. We have the successful programs that are well-funded and working well, but also the programs, policies, and actions that you as a community feel are important to you. And so we want to give the city council their best context for good decision-making. So we want to explore in this process and your participation into discovering and analyzing what some of those programs and some of those policies that the city can explore as part of this. So we're going to get you into another exercise here, and Ines is going to walk you through that. So go ahead, Ines.
Thanks, Dave. All right, so we'll start off by logging out to Mentimeter. So if you'll either open a new tab in your browser, or if you're on your phone, go to your internet and go to menti.com. That is MENTI.com. And then you enter in the code 65047582. And it'll take you to a site that'll ask you this question that you see on your screen, and you'll be able to type in your responses, and they'll populate live on the screen here, and we'll be able to discuss each. So if you didn't quite catch that, or if you're on the phone listening and aren't able to see the screen, that's menti.com, and then enter the code 65047582. And then it'll take you to this question. So tell us about your experience with housing in this city. What we're looking for here is just as the question asks, your experience with housing. How have you developed housing? Have you worked with the city on developing housing, or your own experience looking for housing for yourself, whether that's units for rent or to buy? What has that experience been like? If you've got any comments on the types of housing that's available in the city, maybe you didn't find what you were looking for, if you'll enter that in. And we'll give you a few moments to log on and get everything typed up. But as you see here on the screen, we've got our first submittal. We have residents in the downtown area. So we have somebody who has experience and lives in this region. The next comment we have, there are a lot of big, expensive single family houses with big backyards on big lots in the city. Maybe if you are able to kind of expand upon that, whether that's something that you're looking for, whether you're looking for something different. We've got crowded, haphazard, not enough for sale affordable housing, third fastest growing city in California. We have somebody else who's entered in. I have rented an apartment, lived in an owned condo, owned a home, and am currently renting a home in Dublin over my 20+ year as a resident. That's awesome. Got some good experience there. Market rate housing, price out of reach. Demand for housing is high. Supply has not kept up with the demand. Housing here has gotten especially expensive over the last several years. We have another comment, frustrated that there is a possibility of disapproving a housing site that has been the city's plans for over 30 years. This is referring to East Ranch, especially because that project will provide a multitude of housing opportunities, also below market rate units. And so for anybody on the call that may not be familiar, below market rates are those units that are affordable to low, moderate, and lower income households.
And then just as a reminder, these comments that you're typing on the screen will be saved and logged. You'll be able to access those and be able to see those as part of the process. So we'll be sure to post those and make the comments available to the public.
Yep, thank you, Dave. And then also a note on that, all of our community outreach, all public comments are included in the housing element. So we do show how the public's comments has been taken into consideration in developing the housing element. We've got a comment, since the pandemic, there is proof of dire need for housing in Dublin. Another would like to see more housing opportunities, especially affordable housing opportunities near transit. This is not a very walkable city at all. And as you saw with some of our candidate sites, that is the goal, is to be able to add those affordable units near community resources and near access to transits to be able to get throughout the community easily, whether that's within Dublin or outside throughout the region. Then we've got one more comment, and I think we'll move on to the next question after that. But also, if you'd like to continue putting answers or any other comments related to this, feel free to add to the chat. So the last one is, renter in downtown area, would like to buy in the city someday, but high prices and corresponding high down payments makes it challenging to get there. Would like to see more housing near transit. All right, so we'll move on to the next question now. Do you have any fair housing concerns that the city should address? So whether you've seen or heard of discrimination, for example, or equal access to housing in the city. Have you heard of anything or seen occurrences, anything that we should know and address in the housing element? To elaborate on the fair housing elements, we do have a section in the housing elements that looks over opportunities to resources within the city, access to these resources, as well as the location of particularly affordable housing throughout the community. It's important to make sure that these units are equally spread out throughout the city, and that lower income households do have equal access to transit and resources. So we've got a first comment here. Inclusionary housing has thus far been mainly moderate income. We need some low income. Noted. We'll give you a couple minutes as well to type out these maybe longer answers. We've got a second one, is a common concern is that people do not want to see affordable housing units spread out. SCS property, for example, has affordable housing confined to a small 2.5 acre space. Is that not an AFFH violation? So the goal is to identify sites throughout the community to be able to locate these affordable housing units. This may include sites that have a higher number of units because it's located near transit and has high access to community resources. However, we want to make sure that there are other opportunities for affordable housing units spread out throughout the city. And we also have a comment in the Q&A. Are there any parks transit changes being considered due to the influx of new housing? Example, having more parks, more parking areas, roads. Michael, let me know if you'd like to add to this, but one of the things that we look at when considering candidate sites is making sure that they do have adequate access to parks, to transit, and as I mentioned, community resources. So that's something we look when selecting the sites.
And a couple other things that I would add to it. So our Parks and Community Services Department is currently working on an update to our Parks Master Plan. So there potentially are some changes that would happen there. And from a transportation standpoint, the big change underway within the city of Dublin is the approval of Dublin Boulevard extension. So from a transportation standpoint, not necessarily transit, but as indicated, when projects come forward, we analyze them for potential impacts, environmental impacts, and some of that is transportation and impacts on public services such as parks and other facilities as well.
Thank you, Michael. And we've got one more submission here. We have our veteran housing was successful and would like to see more transitional housing to help others be housed and part of the community. We've got another, there are no or few options for people with disabilities. The East Ranch project will provide this throughout the Sunflower Hill program, yet there is a possibility for denial. All right, so with that, we'll move on to the next question. Have you recently gone through the entitlement process? If so, do you have any feedback based on your experience? If you own property and have worked with the city on receiving permits, whether it be for any renovations to your home or whether it be to as a developer to construct in the city, do you have any feedback on your experience and how that that occurred? What we're looking for is we would like to know if there have been, if you have any positive notes on your experience, as well as if there have been any potential constraints that may hinder future housing developments. That's something that we look at throughout the housing elements. We'll be assessing the city's processes and review processes. I'll give you a few minutes to type in those answers. Otherwise, it looks like maybe attendants here may not have had experience with the entitlement process, in which case, no worries. If anybody is typing in an answer and before I move on to the next question, if you just raise your hand, just let me know you're typing in an answer. Otherwise, oh, we've got one. Okay, I'll wait to move on to the next question then. Thank you.
Inez, we do have a hand raised. If you want.
Yes. Yep, and I believe that that was because he was submitting, he was still typing in, but let's see. And Davis, you have the opportunity to speak if you did have a comment or a question.
No, thank you. It's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, and so we'll move on to our last question. Are there particular housing types you would like to see more of in the city? So we've got a few different housing types here. We've got single family, apartments, condos, townhomes, ADUs, senior housing, affordable housing, transitional and supportive housing, emergency shelters, or other. And if you do select other, if you'd like to raise your hand or put in the chats to elaborate what that type of housing is. Otherwise, you should have the opportunity to select as many as are applicable. So we do have one. Oh, and I see I'm only able to select one option. Let me, how about I remove this? Apologies. Let me just change that setting. There we go. All right, so you should have access to selecting multiple options now. All right, so we've got a few different types here. So we've got majority so far have selected affordable housing. That's 27%. We've got 14% for senior housing as well as transitional and supportive housing. Now we've got 19 on townhomes. And it looks like we do have 6% have selected other. If you're able to add to the chat, kind of elaborate upon what that
What do you mean
is.
by other? Yeah. It's a good indication of the diversity of need within the community. You can see in this, you've made a very nice slice of the pie here. And so it's fairly evenly distributed for the most part. So that's really a testament to the needs of across the board in the community. So that's a great indicator. Thank you all for your comments.
So we've got one comment, affordable by design townhomes. Thank you, Tom. All right, looks like the chart has settled. So we're at 24% for affordable housing. We've got an equal amount for townhomes and transitional and supportive housing. All right, and if no one has any additional responses for this one, we will move on. And so that concludes the Menti exercise. If you have any additional comments or responses to these questions that you'd like to provide more information on, please add it to the chat. We do save the chat and we'll refer back to this as well. And it looks like we do have one more comment on duplexes, stacked or side by side. Thank you, Brandon. And so with that, we'll move on to next steps. And so we've got here our schedule. As you see, we've had the first workshop about a month ago, and we're here at our second workshop. The survey will end on the 28th at the end of the month. So you've got about a week and a half or so left to submit your responses and let your friends, family, neighbors know that it's available as well. We've got a study session with a planning commission scheduled for March 8th. We have another city council check-in on March 15th. And for these meetings, these are public, so you are welcome. And we do recommend that you do attend if you'd like to follow along with the update process. We'll be releasing the public review draft of the complete housing elements on April 7th. It will be available for a month, so from April 7th to May 7th. And then we've got another planning commission meeting on April 26th and a city council review on May 17th. So keep these dates in mind if you would like to remain involved in the process. We'll now go into some public comments or questions. So if you'll, as you're well familiar with now at this point, raise your hand if you've got any general comments or questions about the housing element updates, the candidate sites, policies, programs. If you have any general comments, please feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat, and we'll unmute you. It looks like we don't have any comments, any raised hands at the moment. While you debate whether or not to make a comment, we have here on the screen Michael Cass's information. If you'd like to reach out and send a follow-up comment or questions, please feel free to contact him. We also have the link to the Housing Element Update webpage down at the bottom of your screen. This is our go-to resource center. You'll find all of the recorded workshops here. You'll find the schedule for upcoming meetings, any important dates to keep in mind, and as well as when we do release the public review draft document, it'll be available here for you to review. And it looks like we've got one comment in the chat from Richard Lee. No questions, just want to say I am very supportive of these sites and of building more housing and affordable housing in general. Also +1 to Richard Thornberry's earlier comment on more transit-oriented housing that relies less on cars. Thank you.
And all your comments in the chat as well will be saved, and you'll be provided access to that at a later date.
We've got one comment here that I might pass over to you, Michael, if you have a response to. It's how does the city reconcile city-zoned housing sites with a referendum?
Yeah, so this is a question that Christy Wheeler, our Assistant Community Development Director, spoke to earlier this evening. Ultimately, it's to be determined. We're going to wait and see what the outcome is of the referendum process. But we are closely monitoring that process to see how that shakes out, because we are aware that it potentially will have some impacts.
Thank you. All right, and so with that, if there are no further comments or questions, I'll turn it over to you, Michael, to conclude the workshop, and we'll stick on a bit longer as well if anybody else has any further comments or questions or.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate comments from Inez and Dave. Thank you everyone for attending and being part of this discussion. We really appreciate all of your feedback. And we hope that you'll continue to stay engaged as we continue through this process during the remainder of the year. So thank you very much.